It is Thursday, February 26th, 2026. And I have to be honest with you, looking at the absolute mountain of intelligence reports, diplomatic cables, and just raw market data we have stacked up for today
It's a lot.
is a massive stack. And I keep coming back to a single word for all of it: friction.
Oh, that is the perfect word for it. It's palpable today.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have covered crisis days before on this deep dive, but it feels different. It's not one single explosion. It's this grinding sound of entire systems rubbing against their absolute limits. Geopolitical systems, financial markets, even biological systems.
That is exactly the image I can't shake. Because if you look at the map right now, from
Yeah.
the diplomatic hotels in Geneva to the waters off Havana, and then down to the literal micro level of the cells in our own bodies, everyone seems to be in this precarious holding pattern.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an active holding pattern.
Yeah.
The engines are revving at the red line, but the brakes are just slammed shut.
Which is usually exactly when things break. When you hold that much tension for that long.
Exactly. And that is our mission for this deep dive today. We aren't just reading the news to you. We are mapping those stress fractures to see where the breaks might happen.
These are all connected.
They really are. So here is the roadmap for how we're going to tackle this. First, we have to talk about Geneva. The U.S. and Iran just stepped back from the ledge, but only by an inch.
We really need to parse the non-deal there, because in diplomacy, what didn't happen today is often just as significant as what Drew did.
Then we're going to look at what I'm calling the accountability ripple,
Okay.
because it is frankly wild that in 2026, the ghost of Jeffrey Epstein is still the most destructive force in the room.
Still taking down careers.
Right. Hitting Hillary Clinton on Capitol Hill and decapitating the leadership at Dios in the exact same afternoon. After that, we are going to do a serious reality check on the tech sector. Nvidia posted numbers that, they should have launched a massive bull run.
But the market absolutely puked.
It did. We need to explain why great is no longer good enough for Wall Street. And we have to talk about Nano Banana.
I still cannot believe that name cleared legal. I really can't.
No, but once you get past the ridiculous name, the shift to on-device AI is a massive pivot for your privacy and potentially a total nightmare for safety. We'll get into all of that.
Plus, we have the human element today. We've got a NASA failure that was supposed to be cheap, a breakthrough nasal vaccine, and a new study on aging that suggests our job analyzing all this global tension might literally be killing us.
A super cheery thought to start the hour.
Just keeping it light.
Always.
No.
But look, we have a lot of ground to cover for you today. Let's start at the friction point with the highest potential blast radius, Geneva.
The U.S. and Iran nuclear talks.
Let's set the context for you before we actually get into the room. For the last year or so, the temperature has been rising steadily. We've seen Israeli strikes on Iranian missile sites. We've seen Iranian drone swarms harassing commercial shipping.
And a massive U.S. naval buildup in the Gulf.
Right. And don't forget the rhetoric from Washington. President Trump recently came out and said, very explicitly, that, quote, really bad things, unquote, could happen if diplomacy failed.
That wasn't a subtle hint. In diplomatic speak, that is a direct threat of kinetic action. War.
So against that incredibly tense backdrop, we had these talks in Geneva that just wrapped up today. Now, when we say talks, I think people usually imagine two delegations sitting across a long mahogany table, pouring coffee, hashing out the details.
Yeah, that is absolutely not what happened here. This was proximity diplomacy.
Explain how that actually works on the ground.
So the Iranians absolutely refuse to sit in the same room as the Americans right now. They view it as a concession of their dignity given the current sanctions. So you have the Iranian foreign minister, Abbas Araki, sitting in one hotel suite, probably somewhere like the Intercontinental.
Okay.
And then in a completely different wing, or maybe even a different hotel entirely, you have the U.S. envoys.
And who is running between them?
The Omani foreign minister, Saeed Badir al-Busaidi. The Omanis are really the unsung heroes of 21st century diplomacy in the Middle East. They're essentially the only players who can walk through both of those hotel doors without being searched for a wire.
So he's literally walking down the hall, shuttling messages, proposals, counter-proposals back and forth between these rooms.
Exactly. It's incredibly tedious, but it saves face for Tehran.
Let's talk about the U.S. side of that equation, though. The envoys in that room were Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. That is a very specific choice of personnel by the White House.
It sends a massive signal. Kushner isn't a career State Department bureaucrat. He is family. He represents the direct, unfiltered voice of the president.
And Witkoff is a hard-nosed real estate guy.
Right. Sending those two specific guys tells the Ayatollah, look, we are here to cut a deal. We aren't here to discuss diplomatic philosophy or human rights records. We are here to talk numbers, leverage, and transactional outcomes.
So the million-dollar question for the markets and for global security, did they get a deal today?
No deal.
Okay, so was it a failure? Did the talks collapse?
No,
Oh,
and this
no.
is the nuance we really have to get right for you. It was a non-collapse. In the world of high-stakes nuclear brinkmanship, coming out and saying we agreed to keep talking is actually a massive victory.
Just keeping the patient alive on the table.
Exactly. Oman officially called it significant progress today. And the intelligence reports we have suggest Tehran actually showed some flexibility on their enrichment caps.
That is a big shift, isn't it? Because 6 months ago, the hardliners in Iran were saying that 60% enrichment was a red line they would never, ever retreat from. Why the sudden change in tune?
Economics. It almost always comes back to the money. If you look at the internal inflation data coming out of Iran right now, it is absolutely crushing their working class. The rial has devalued significantly against the dollar.
You're seeing strikes in the bazaars, right?
Widespread strikes. Ayatollah Khamenei is in a total vice grip here.
Squeezed between his own people and the American sanctions.
Right. On one side, he has a population that is hungry, they're angry, and they are prone to protesting. They desperately need the economy to breathe. But on the other side, he has the hardliners in the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, who are screaming at him not to give a single inch to the great Satan.
So he needs sanctions relief, but he has to make it look like a win?
He needs hard cash. He needs to be able to sell oil openly on the global market, and the only way to get that is to give the Americans something tangible on the nuclear file.
But President Trump needs something out of this too, right?
Yeah.
He threatened war,
Mm-hmm.
but does he actually want to pull the trigger on that?
Trump is a very unique variable in these situations. He historically loves the threat of war as a leverage point, the madman theory making the other side think you might actually do it.
Right.
But historically, he hates the reality of war. A kinetic war with Iran isn't like an isolated airstrike in Syria. It would immediately close the Strait of Hormuz.
Which sends global oil prices to what? $150 a barrel?
Easily 150, maybe 200. And that destroys his domestic economic agenda instantly. Gas prices at the pump spike, inflation comes roaring back, the stock market tanks.
So Trump wants the win the photo op, the historic deal, without the kinetic cost.
Exactly. Both sides are terrified of the actual alternative, which is why, despite all the fiery rhetoric over the last few months, they are still in that hotel in Geneva passing notes through the Omanis.
It's like a game of chicken, where both cars are driving at 100 miles an hour, but neither driver actually wants to crash. They're just waiting for the other guy to tap the brakes.
That's a great way to put it, and the markets know it. If you look at how oil prices and the S&P 500 behaved today, they were watching Geneva like a hawk.
Yeah, the oil futures were completely flat.
Right, because if a headline had crossed the wire saying talks collapse, you would have seen a massive, immediate sell-off. The fact that they're scheduling follow-up technical talks in Vienna next month, that is the market safety blanket right now.
So talks to continue is basically the best news we could have hoped for today. But while the diplomats were being incredibly careful in Geneva, things got incredibly messy and deadly, much closer to home. We need to pivot and talk about Cuba.
Yeah, this story is a human tragedy, and it is rapidly becoming a diplomatic nightmare.
Let's set the scene for you. This happened off the northern coast of Cuba. A speedboat, tagged and registered in Florida, carrying 10 people.
Mostly Cuban Americans.
Right. It gets intercepted by Cuban border troops.
Yeah.
And then absolute chaos. Gunfire ensues. 4 people on that boat were killed. 6 others were wounded or detained.
4 dead civilians in peacetime. That is a massive incident.
And, as is always the case with U.S.-Cuba relations, we have 2 completely different movies playing on the exact same screen. We need to parse these conflicting narratives for you, because the truth is probably somewhere in the murky middle, but the political reaction depends entirely on which version you believe.
Precisely. Let's look at Havana's official view first. The Cuban Foreign Ministry released a statement almost immediately after it happened. They claim this was a hostile incursion.
They actually used the word terrorist, didn't they?
They did. They claim the passengers on that Florida speedboat were armed with rifles, handguns, and even Molotov cocktails. Their narrative is that the boat refused verbal commands to stop, maneuvered aggressively toward the patrol, and opened fire on the border troops first.
So they're painting this as a coordinated paramilitary raid.
Yes. They are saying these people were trying to infiltrate the island to commit violent acts, maybe sabotage local infrastructure.
Okay, that is the Cuban government's line. Now pivot to Florida. What are the families of the people on that boat saying? What is the diaspora saying today?
The complete opposite. Relatives in Miami are telling the press that the group was entirely unarmed. They say they were on a humanitarian mission.
Delivering aid.
Aid, basic food supplies, medicine. Or, in some versions of the story coming out, they were going to support opposition protests that have been sporadically popping up on the island.
But they are adamant there were no weapons.
Completely adamant. They view this as an unprovoked massacre of civilians who are just trying to help their desperate family members back home.
The discrepancy between Molotov cocktails and medicine is, well, it's everything.
It is. And without independent verification, which we are highly unlikely to get quickly given the closed nature of the Cuban state, everyone just retreats to their ideological corners.
The fallout from this must be instantaneous in Washington.
Oh, it's explosive. Diplomatically, U.S. officials and various human rights groups are already publicly condemning the disproportionate use of force. Because even if the boat didn't stop when ordered, opening fire with lethal intent on a civilian speedboat is a major escalation. They are demanding a transparent investigation.
But domestically, think about the politics of Florida. Florida is an absolute political powerhouse for the administration.
The outcry there is deafening right now. You have massive protests forming in Little Havana in Miami as we speak. You have local politicians calling for even tighter sanctions. You have people demanding the U.S. government, quote, do something, unquote.
What does do something even mean in this context?
That's the danger. Maybe it means sending the Coast Guard closer to the territorial line. Maybe it means cutting off whatever fragile diplomatic ties remain completely.
But there is a counterpressure there, isn't there? The third rail of Cuban politics.
Remittances.
Right. The money.
As angry as the Cuban-American community is today, many of them still have direct family on the island, grandmothers, cousins, siblings. They rely heavily on the money sent from Miami just to survive the economic crisis there.
So if the U.S. retaliates too hard.
Exactly. If the U.S. shuts down the remittance channels as a punishment, or if Cuba cuts them off in spite, the people who actually suffer the most are the families themselves.
It's a brutal catch-22.
It threatens to freeze everything. There has actually been some very limited practical cooperation between the U.S. and Cuba recently. Things like drug interdiction in the Caribbean, Coast Guard communication, hurricane monitoring, an incident with 4 dead. It puts all of that in the deep freeze.
It just shows you how quickly a localized incident can spiral into an international crisis. And honestly, it fits a pattern we are seeing across the board today, the pattern of sovereignty.
Borders are becoming very, very sharp lines today.
We saw this with Denmark and Greenland just this morning.
Yes. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen called an early election for March 24th, and she did it specifically because of a standoff with the U.S. over Greenland.
Is this the Trump wants to buy Greenland thing again? Because I thought we left that in the past.
It's the return of that idea, yes, or at least heavily increased U.S. strategic and economic control over the territory. And Frederiksen is betting her entire political future on a very hardline sovereignty stance. She is basically saying to her voters, I will protect the kingdom from being carved up, and she's calling a snap election to prove the people are with her.
It sounds almost funny to some people, the idea of buying a massive island. But for the Danes, this is an existential issue of national pride and territory.
It is deeply serious for them. And look over at Pakistan and Afghanistan. We had actual military clashes and airstrikes at their border today. Pakistan is claiming they are targeting TTP militants hiding there. The Taliban is accusing Pakistan of blatantly bombing civilians.
It's the exact same friction point. Where does my authority end and yours begin?
Precisely. And then you have Canada and South Korea signing a brand new, highly classified intel sharing pact today.
Which is also about sovereignty, just proactively.
Driven entirely by the Indo-Pacific tensions with North Korea and China. Nations are locking arms and sharing secrets because they feel the physical borders of their influence are being threatened.
So from Geneva to the waters off Cuba to the ice of Greenland, the overarching theme today is do not cross the line.
And if you do cross it, expect gunfire or a snap election.
Which brings us nicely to our second segment. We're going to shift from physical geopolitical borders to ethical borders, or maybe the total lack of them in some circles.
It's the accountability ripple.
It is genuinely wild to me that we're sitting here in 2026 and the name Jeffrey Epstein is still the biggest wrecking ball in the room.
It's the long shadow. No matter how much money or power you have, you just cannot outrun it.
Let's start with Capitol Hill, part 1 of this saga today, Hillary Clinton.
Right. So, to set the setup here for you, The Republican-led House Oversight Committee has been heavily probing Epstein's financial and social networks for months now. They want to know if the Department of Justice deliberately withheld files during earlier investigations, and they want to know exactly who knew what and when.
So as part of that, Hillary Clinton gives a closed-door deposition today, February 26th. What did she actually say in the room?
Well, according to the transcripts and the official statements released afterward, she played a very, very disciplined legal game. She stated clearly that she, quote, did not recall, unquote, ever meeting Epstein.
I do not recall. The four most powerful, bulletproof words in Washington.
Exactly. It's the ultimate legal shield. It's very hard to prove perjury against a memory lapse. She also asserted firmly that she never flew on his private plane and never visited his properties in New York or the Virgin Islands. And then she went on the offensive.
She turned it back on the committee itself.
She did. She explicitly accused the Republican members of using this entire inquiry to deflect attention from President Trump's own well-documented past social ties to Epstein. It was a very combative political stance. She essentially called the whole hearing a partisan circus.
But there was some drama inside that room that kind of proves her point about the circus atmosphere, wasn't there?
The leaked photo.
Yes. Reportedly, Representative Lauren Boebert actually took a photo of Clinton sitting at the deposition table and leaked it to the press.
Which, we should note, is a strict, undeniable violation of committee rules. You absolutely cannot take photos, let alone leak them, in a closed congressional deposition.
It seems almost petty, but it signals a total breakdown of institutional decorum.
It highlights the partisan divide perfectly for you. For Democrats watching this whole hearing is just pure revenge politics. It's content creation for social media fundraising.
But for Republicans?
For Republicans, they say, look, we are just following the evidence wherever it leads. And they are very quick to point out that Bill Clinton is actually scheduled to testify next.
And Bill Clinton's situation regarding Epstein is very different, isn't it?
It is materially different. He has previously acknowledged publicly that he did fly on Epstein's plane several times, though he vehemently denies any knowledge of or participation in any wrongdoing. So his testimony might be quite a bit stickier than hers.
Is there a broader takeaway here beyond just the partisan political theater?
There is a civil liberties perspective that is really getting lost in the noise of all this. We are talking about 3 million pages of highly sensitive documents being weaponized politically. Legal experts are genuinely worried that dragging this out in such a public, partisan way might simply re-traumatize the actual surviving victims.
Without actually yielding any new actionable criminal charges against anyone living.
Exactly. It becomes political entertainment rather than actual justice for the victims.
But the Epstein ripples aren't just hitting Washington today. They are hitting the Swiss Alps. Let's talk about part 2 of this, the Davos resignation.
This is a huge shift in the global elite structure. Burj Brenda, the president and CEO of the World Economic Forum, the guy who literally runs the Davos conference, resigned today.
And this is directly linked to the Epstein files.
Directly. Revelations came out about private, one-on-one business dinners and very friendly email exchanges between Brenda and Epstein back in 2018 and 2019.
Wait, 2018? That is fairly late in the game. Epstein was already a convicted sex offender by then.
Hmm?
This wasn't the early 2000s when people could somewhat plausibly claim ignorance of his background.
That is the critical point that forced the resignation. Brenda claims he didn't know the full extent of Epstein's history at the time of those dinners.
How do you not know?
That's what everyone is asking. The optics are just terrible. You are the head of the organization that explicitly claims to set the moral compass for the global economy. You lecture the world on ethics, and you're having private dinners with a known predator to discuss funding.
This really hits the elite of the elite.
It does, and that's the powerful symbolism here. Critics of the WEF look at this and say, see? The people running the world, the people preaching to us about improving the state of the world at Davos, they operate with absolutely zero accountability behind closed doors.
How are his supporters framing this?
Supporters would argue that his resignation actually proves that ethical standards are finally being enforced. He was caught, and he is stepping down. This system is self-correcting, albeit very slowly.
It feels like a slow-motion purge of the global elite. Whether you are a former Secretary of State or the head of the WEF, if that name is in your calendar, you're simply not safe.
No one is safe from the past anymore. That's the real lesson here. The digital footprint, the flight logs, the calendar invites, they are eternal.
Okay, let's pivot. We've done the heavy geopolitical and political stuff. Let's talk about money, tech, and what we're calling the curse of high expectations.
My absolute favorite kind of curse to analyze.
Let's start with the market pulse today. Nvidia. For the last few years, Nvidia has been the undisputed golden child of the stock market.
They are the engine of the AI revolution. If AI is the new gold rush, Nvidia is the company selling all the shovels.
So they reported their quarterly earnings today. How did they actually do?
They crushed it. Again, top-line revenue came in at $68 billion. They beat Wall Street estimates across the board. By any normal historical metric, it was an absolute blowout quarter.
And the stock market threw a parade.
The exact opposite.
Yeah.
The stock fell 5% in after-hours trading, and it dragged the entire NASDAQ index down with it.
No, that makes sense for us. They make more money than anyone expected, their guidance is fine, and the stock goes down.
This is the curse of high expectations in action. But there is a very specific technical reason behind the fear today called the CapEx wall.
Okay, unpack that. CapEx is capital expenditure, right? Money spent on physical assets.
Right. For the last 3 years, the biggest companies in the world, Microsoft, Google, Meta, Amazon, have been spending hundreds of billions of dollars collectively buying these incredibly expensive Nvidia chips. They are building massive data centers. That hardware spending is where Nvidia's revenue comes from.
But that level of spending can't just scale up forever.
Exactly. Investors are looking at these massive checks being written for data centers and asking a very simple question. Where is the profit? They are terrified of market saturation. They are thinking, okay, you bought the chips, you built the giant AI brain. Now show us the consuming application that actually makes that money back.
So the market is essentially saying, we don't need you to build more shovels right now. We need to see the actual gold you dug up.
Precisely. And until the software side of AI catches up to the hardware and starts generating massive, undeniable profits, investors are very nervous that the massive chip buying is going to slow down. Today, that nervousness just crystallized into a tech sell-off.
Speaking of the software side trying to catch up, Google made some news today with a new product name that, I'm sorry, I just have to laugh every time I read it.
Go ahead, say it. Let the listeners hear it.
Nano Banana 2.
Yes, Nano Banana 2.
Who is naming these things? Is there just a guy in a basement in Mountain View throwing darts at a fruit bowl? Mega Kumquat 3.
It certainly seems that way. It sounds like a smoothie you'd buy at a gym, not cutting-edge artificial intelligence. But if you look past the truly ridiculous name, the tech behind this is actually the big so what of the segment today.
Okay, what is it actually doing?
It is a brand new AI image generation model. But unlike the ones we are used to, like Midjourney or DALL-E, which require massive supercomputers in the cloud to run, Nano Banana is designed specifically for your smartphone.
On-device generated.
Completely on-device.
Yeah.
It uses the NPU, the neural processing unit, physically located inside your phone's hardware to generate the image.
So my phone generates the image locally. Nothing is sent to a Google server.
Correct. And that signals a massive structural shift in tech. We are moving AI from the giant, energy-hungry server farm directly into your pocket.
That sounds fantastic for privacy.
Oh, it's a huge win for privacy. Your data, your weird prompts, they stay on your phone. Google doesn't see what you're asking it to make, but...
There's always a but with this stuff.
But think about the safety implications. When an image is generated on a central Google server, Google can put strict guardrails on it. They can program it to say, no, you cannot make a deep fake of the president committing a crime, or you can't generate copyrighted material.
Right. The server acts as a choke point, a gatekeeper.
That is the exact trade-off. It totally democratizes the creation of everything. Amazing art, yes, but also highly convincing disinformation at scale. And there's a very cynical business reason Google is doing this right now, which ties into another economic story today, the hardware slump.
Right. I saw the forecast on this. Global smartphone shipments are set for their steepest year-over-year decline ever.
People just aren't buying new phones anymore. The hardware has gotten too good. A phone from 3 years ago is still perfectly fine for 99% of users.
I'm literally still using mine from 2023. It works perfectly. The battery is fine. The screen is great.
Exactly. So if you are Apple or Google, how do you convince someone like you to spend $1,000 on a brand new device? You can't just give them a slightly better camera lens anymore. You have to give them Nano Banana.
You have to say, this new phone can create art locally. Your old phone can't do it because it doesn't have the new MPU chip.
So the AI software is simply the bait to sell the new hardware cycle.
It's all connected. They're willing to risk the safety chaos just to move physical units.
That's the business reality.
Before we leave the tech and business segment, there is one more note from Europe today. Tesla versus the unions.
The Battle of Berlin finally ends.
Tesla and the massive German union IG Metall reached an official truce today at the Berlin Gigafactory.
This is highly significant because Tesla, historically speaking, absolutely hates unions. In the US, Elon Musk has fought unionization efforts tooth and nail for years.
But operating in Germany is a very different game.
Germany operates on a system of co-determination. You really cannot operate large-scale manufacturing there without playing ball with the works councils and the unions. And IG Metall is arguably the most powerful trade union in the world.
So Tesla finally blinked.
They compromised. They realized they were losing too much money in production time due to localized strikes and worker unrest. They formally agreed today to safety improvements and better communication structures to stop the walkouts.
It's a sign that even the biggest, most disruptive tech giants have to adapt to local rules eventually. You can't just disrupt a century of local labor laws just because you're Tesla.
It's a harsh reality check for Silicon Valley hubris.
All right, let's bring it home, literally. We need to talk about domestic tensions right here in the U.S.
There's a lot of friction domestically today, too.
Let's start with the Medicaid battle. Because this isn't just bureaucratic noise in Washington. This is real money affecting real people.
A very large amount of money. The Trump administration, specifically an announcement driven by Vice President J.D. Vance today, is withholding $259 million in federal Medicaid funds from the state of Minnesota.
$259 million. That is a massive hole in a state budget. For people who might not know the mechanics, how does Medicaid funding actually work between the states and the feds?
It's a matching system. The state spends its own money providing health care for low-income residents, and the federal government reimburses a certain percentage of that cost, usually around 50%, sometimes more. What the White House is doing right now is unilaterally freezing that reimbursement check.
What is their official justification for doing that?
Yeah. The administration cites, quote, widespread fraud, unquote, and a total lack of financial oversight. They claim Minnesota isn't properly auditing where the federal money goes, so the feds are turning off the tap until the state fixes its accounting.
But the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, has a very different take on this.
Oh, absolutely. Walz is calling it blatant political retaliation. Remember, Minnesota was a major hotbed of political protests against the Trump administration's policies. Walz is basically saying, you are punishing our citizens because we disagree with you politically. He is framing it as the weaponization of federalism.
And while these politicians fight on cable news, who actually gets caught in the crossfire?
The people who rely on Medicaid to live. Veterans. Disabled residents, low-income families relying on state clinics. They are the ones who might see their critical services cut or delayed while the state and the federal government fight this partisan war in the courts.
Speaking of fighting in the courts, the Supreme Court made a massive move today regarding trade.
They did. SCOTUS ruled today that Trump's 2025 tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China were unlawful.
Unlawful. That is a very strong rebuke from the court.
It is a major historic check on presidential power. The court essentially ruled that the executive branch cannot just use vague national security claims as a blanket excuse to unilaterally tax everything coming across the border without congressional approval.
But the reaction from the White House. Trump called the ruling, quote, unfortunate, unquote, and immediately vowed to find a, quote, workaround.
Which is exactly what makes the global markets so incredibly nervous. Markets can price in bad news, but they absolutely hate uncertainty. If the tariffs are officially illegal, but the president says, I'm going to do it anyway through a legal loophole, businesses simply don't know how to price their goods.
Right. If you run a factory, do you buy Mexican steel now? Do you wait to see if the workaround holds?
Exactly. It completely stalls corporate planning, and it directly fuels inflation fears.
It feels like everything in the domestic system is being pushed to the absolute limit. Even the physical security of the president himself.
We saw that tragically at Mar-a-Lago today.
Yeah, the Secret Service shot and killed an armed intruder who was actively breaching the perimeter of the estate.
It just highlights the intense, highly elevated security atmosphere around political figures right now. We are not living in a relaxed time. And just to add a very practical, everyday headache for our listeners, out of all this friction in Washington...
Oh, no, don't tell me. Travel.
The looming DHS funding fight in Congress is causing them to implement, quote, emergency measures, unquote, at the TSA.
So if you're flying this week, expect incredibly long lines at the airport.
Expect severe delays. Expect frustration. TSA agents might be facing furloughs. It's a small detail compared to everything else, but it really adds to that general exhausting sense of friction we talked about at the top of the show.
Okay, let's zoom out. Way out. Segment 5. Science, environment, and the fragility of systems.
This is where we look at the physical realities of the world.
Let's start up in space. NASA had what they are calling a cheap failure today.
The Lunar Trailblazer mission.
A $72 million mission, completely gone.
Lost in the void. And the cause of the failure is, honestly, it's frustratingly simple.
It wasn't like a micrometeor strike or a massive engine explosion.
No, it was a basic software error. The navigation software literally pointed the solar panels away from the sun.
Oh my God. It just starved to death in orbit.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
It completely ran out of battery because it wasn't looking at its only energy source. The post-mortem report came out today, and it heavily criticizes what NASA calls the Class D model.
Explain what Class D actually means in space exploration.
That is NASA's internal designation for low-cost, high-risk missions. The philosophy is that you build things cheap, you use commercial off-the-shelf parts, and you launch fast. You explicitly accept a higher chance of total failure in exchange for saving hundreds of millions of dollars.
But what is the lesson here?
The lesson the report points out is that if you cut too many corners, like Lockheed Martin apparently not fully testing the interaction of this specific software patch, you don't actually get cheap science, you just get expensive garbage.
You get a $72 million, completely dead paperweight floating out in deep space.
Exactly. It's a very stark warning about engineering discipline in the modern era. You cannot cheat the laws of physics or code.
From space back down to the atmosphere, the weather is, well, it's breaking terrible records again.
Hurricane Melissa.
I remember when this hit the coast last season, but they just released the final postseason analysis today.
And they upgraded it significantly. The National Hurricane Center says it is now officially a Category 5 storm with sustained peak winds of 190 miles per hour.
190. That is almost incomprehensible. That's a tornado that's 50 miles wide.
It officially ties the record for the strongest Atlantic hurricane ever recorded. And it's not an isolated event. It's a terrifying data point for warming ocean temperatures.
And we are seeing extreme system failures all over the globe today. Brazil had deadly floods and landslides. 39 people confirmed dead today. Cape Cod is experiencing a massive blizzard right now with literal hurricane force winds.
It's the upper limits being tested. That's what really strikes me about this data. Whether it's extreme heat and rain in Brazil, or extreme snow in Cape Cod, or unprecedented wind speed in the Atlantic, the extremes are simply getting more extreme. The climate systems are being pushed beyond their historical boundaries.
It's a lot to process.
It is incredibly heavy.
But we do have to end on some human news. Public health. We have some bad data, but we also have some very good news.
Let's do the bad news first. U.S. heart health is completely stalling out.
I saw this CDC data today. High blood pressure rates in the adult population haven't improved at all since 2009.
That is almost 2 decades of total medical stagnation. And what's actually scarier is that younger demographics people in their 30s and 40s are having significantly more heart attacks than previous generations.
Why is that happening? With all our medical tech, why are we going backward?
It's a combination of chronic stress, highly processed diets, and what doctors call the obesogenic environment. We are literally building a modern lifestyle and a food system that is fundamentally hostile to the human heart.
But the good news. We promise good news.
Stanford Medical.
Stanford unveiled a universal nasal vaccine today.
This is genuinely incredible science. It is designed to protect against COVID, the seasonal flu, and pneumonia, all in one single dose.
And you literally just sniff it.
It's a simple nasal spray. It specifically targets mucosal immunity, stopping the virus right where it naturally enters the body, the nose, and the throat before it ever reaches the lungs. The preclinical trial success looks phenomenal. They're saying this could be a total game changer available to the public by 2027.
So potentially no more annual needle jabs.
Potentially, yes, and much broader, longer-lasting protection. That is a massive scientific win for humanity to balance out the satellite loss.
So we have covered an immense amount of ground for you today. We've gone through nuclear talks in Geneva, shootings off Cuba, political scandals in Washington and Davos, AI tech bubbles, historic hurricanes, and heart health.
It is a very heavy list of friction points.
It brings us to the outro for today's deep dive. The overarching theme we started with was high stakes, because everything, everywhere, feels like it is operating at maximum capacity and maximum tension.
It really does. You can feel it in the headlines.
But before we let you go, I'll leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought. And this actually comes from a brand new study on cellular aging that just dropped today.
Ah, this is the twist. I love this study.
The core finding of the research is this: anxiety about the aging process actually physically accelerates your aging process.
It clinically shortens your telomeres. For those who don't know, telomeres are the little protective caps on the ends of your DNA strands that keep them stable. Stress makes them fray faster.
So, literally worrying about getting old makes your body get old faster.
And if we extrapolate that biological truth to what we do here, constantly worrying about the state of the world might just be physically hurting you?
Look, we just spent an hour giving you all the complex information you need to be deeply well-informed. You now understand the nuances of Geneva. You know why Nvidia stock is acting weird. You know about the WEF. You are powerful because you know what is actually happening.
But the hard science says you cannot let it eat you up inside.
Exactly. Knowing what is happening in the world is power, but endlessly worrying about it is just biology working against you.
So take a breath, step back, and detach a little bit tonight.
Exactly. Thanks for diving in with us today. We'll see you next time.
Stay curious.